There are places in the galaxy where light does not reach, voids between stars where even the cold vacuum seems warmer than the absolute darkness that surrounds them. Yet across this endless night, a light burns. Not the light of a star, but something stranger, something that exists in realms beyond simple physics. A beacon that shines through dimensions where reality itself becomes fluid and uncertain. The Astronomicon. For 10,000 years, this psychic lighthouse has guided humanity through the treacherous currents of the warp, allowing navigator-piloted ships to traverse the galaxy in weeks rather than centuries. It is the heartbeat of the Imperium, the lifeblood that connects a million worlds scattered across the stars. Without it, human civilization would collapse into isolated fragments, each one destined to fall alone to the countless horrors that prowl the darkness between worlds. But this light does not burn without fuel. Every single day, across the surface of Holy Terror, once called Earth, 1,000 human beings are consumed to feed the Astronomicon's endless hunger. Not soldiers dying in glorious battle, not criminals paying penance for their crimes, simply people plucked from worlds they will never see again, brought to Terra on vessels painted black as funeral shrouds, and fed into machinery that will drain every spark of their existence to sustain a light that must never, ever go dark. This is their story. This is what it means to be chosen for sacred service. This is the price humanity pays for survival in a galaxy that wants nothing more than to watch them burn. Across the vastness of the Imperium, there exists a tax more terrible than any other. Not a tithe of grain or ore, soldiers or starships, but a tithe of the very thing that makes us human, our psychic potential, our connection to the immaterial realm that underlies all reality, the warp. Humanity's relationship with this dimension defies simple description. It is a place where thought becomes tangible, where emotion can reshape the fabric of existence, where the laws of physics bow before the power of consciousness itself. For most humans, the warp remains mercifully distant, filtered through the protective barrier of their non-psychic minds. They go about their lives never truly aware of the roiling ocean of souls and madness that exists just beyond the thin membrane of reality. But some are born different. Psychers. The word itself carries weight on every world in the Imperium. Witch, warp-touched, cursed, blessed. The terminology varies, but the fear remains constant. Because a psyker is not simply a human with unusual abilities, they are a doorway, a breach point, a weakness in reality's armor through which the predators of the warp can smell the sweet scent of mortal souls. On every Imperial world, from the industrial forge planets that birth battleships to the agri-worlds that feed billions, from the hive cities that stack humanity 50 kilometers high to the frontier colonies clinging to life on worlds barely transformed, on all of them, psychers are born. The rate varies. Genetic factors, environmental conditions, proximity to warp anomalies, all play their part. But the truth remains, humanity's psychic evolution continues, and with each passing generation, more and more children manifest the gift and curse of warp sight, and every single one of them must be found. The Imperium's survival depends upon it. An untrained psyker is a catastrophe waiting to happen, a breach waiting to open. Given time, their untutored connection to the warp will attract attention, the wrong kind of attention. Demons, predatory entities that exist in the immaterium, always hungry, always searching for a way into real space, where mortal souls cluster like stars in the night. An untrained psyker can become a gateway for these entities, transforming in moments from a frightened child into a conduit through which nightmares pour into reality. The consequences can be apocalyptic. A single possessed psyker can doom a city. A powerful one can threaten an entire world. History records incidents where uncontrolled psykers have torn holes in reality large enough to swallow star systems, creating permanent warp rifts that poison entire sectors of space. This is why the black ships come. Every 100 years, more frequently on some worlds, less on others, the distinctive silhouettes of these ancient vessels appear in a system's void. They announce themselves to the planetary governor with a simple message: prepare the tithe. And across that world, in holding facilities maintained for exactly this purpose, the gathered psykers wait. Many have been there for years. On civilized Imperial worlds, the process is systematic. Local authorities, the Adeptus Arbites enforcers, planetary militia, even witchfinder guilds actively search for signs of psychic manifestation. A child who makes objects move with their thoughts. A teenager whose emotions cause lights to flicker. An adult whose nightmares bleed into the waking world. When found, they are taken, gently if they cooperate, by force if necessary, for their own protection, and the protection of those around them. The holding facilities are not prisons, technically. They are way stations, built with psychically resistant materials, warded with symbols that make the warp's connection more difficult. The psychers are fed, given basic amenities, taught to fear and suppress their gifts as best they can, and they wait. Some facilities hold dozens. Others, on worlds with particularly high birth rates of psychers, hold thousands. They come from every stratum of society. The wealthy merchant's daughter who could read minds. The underhive worker whose pyrokinetic gifts manifested during a gang fight. The noble's son whose precognitive visions proved embarrassingly accurate. The tribal shaman whose healing touch worked too well to be merely medicine. All equal in their damnation, all equal in their potential salvation. When the black ships arrive, there is no ceremony, no speeches about sacred duty or glorious purpose. The transfer is efficient, clinical. The psychers are moved from the planetary holding facilities into the cavernous, psi-shielded holds of the black ships themselves. These chambers are vast, some large enough to hold thousands of souls in tiered galleries that stretch upward into shadows. The walls are black metal, etched with geometries that hurt to look at directly, overlaid with silver inlay in patterns that seem to shift when observed peripherally. These are not decorations, they are mathematical precision made manifest, psychic dampeners that make the warp's connection more distant, more difficult. Walking through these chambers, a psyker feels muffled, disconnected from the part of themselves that once sang with power. It is simultaneously terrifying and relieving. Terrifying because that power, however cursed, was part of their identity. Relieving because its absence means safety from the predators that prowled the edges of their awareness. But the wards are imperfect. They dampen, they do not eliminate. And in a chamber filled with hundreds or thousands of psychers, even dampened connections create resonance. The desperate ones reach out, trying to connect with others who might understand their fear. The stronger ones can't help but broadcast their emotions into the churning sea of minds around them. Madness spreads like fire in these conditions. Despair becomes infectious. Terror breeds more terror. This is why the black ships also carry the most terrifying weapon humanity has ever developed against its own psychers, the Sisters of Silence. These women, and they are always women, for reasons buried in ancient genetic manipulation, possess a trait that makes them anathema to the warp itself. Blanks, pariahs, nulls, born without souls, or with souls that somehow repel the immaterium rather than connecting to it. In their presence, psychers experience something worse than pain. They experience absence. The part of themselves that touches the warp simply stops functioning. It is, survivors have said, like having a limb suddenly severed, except the limb is part of your consciousness itself. The Sisters of Silence patrol the holds, their presence alone maintaining order through supernatural dread. They wear power armor, etched with the same psychic dampening geometries as the walls, carry weapons that crackle with energy, and communicate exclusively through sign language, for they have taken vows of eternal silence as part of their service. They are the Emperor's talons, the Imperium's ultimate weapon against the psychically gifted. And in the holds of the black ships, they are the difference between containment and catastrophe. The journey to terror can take weeks, months, or even years, depending on the black ship's route. These vessels do not travel directly. They follow circuits, visiting system after system, collecting the tithe from world after world. Each stop brings new psychers into the holds. Some ships carry their cargo for standard years, filling every available space with the psychically gifted and damned. Conditions are survivable. The Imperium needs these psychers alive, after all. They are fed corpse starch rations, protein recycled from the dead, flavored to approximate real food. They are given water, sanitation facilities, and climate-controlled environments. By Imperial standards, this qualifies as reasonable treatment, but the psychological toll is devastating. Many psychers have spent their entire lives hiding their gifts, suppressing their abilities, living in constant fear of discovery. Now, surrounded by hundreds or thousands of others like themselves, that fear takes on new dimensions. They know what they're being taken for. The rumors vary from world to world, but certain truths are universal. Psychers taken by the black ships rarely return. Those who do come back changed. Soul-bound astropaths with eyes burned out, sanctioned psychers with their wills shattered and rebuilt, or the rare few selected for specialized service. And then there are the whispers about those who never return at all. They feed them to the Emperor, some say. 1,000 souls a day to keep the light burning. Most dismiss this as superstition. Surely the God Emperor, in his infinite mercy, would not demand such sacrifice. Surely there is some other purpose some sacred duty that requires so many to simply disappear. But in the darkest hours of the journey, when the black ship's hull groans from the pressure of passing through the warp, when reality feels thin and the wards flicker just for a moment, in those hours, even the skeptics begin to wonder. Because deep in their bones, in the part of them that touches the immaterium, they can feel it, a distant pull, a hunger that spans the galaxy, a light that burns with such intensity that even from thousands of light years away, it makes their psychic senses ache. The Astronomicon is calling them home. Part 2. Terra, the Throne World. The approach to Terra is something that no amount of preparation can adequately ready a human mind for. Even for psychers, whose perceptions already extend beyond the merely physical, the experience transcends description. In real space, Terra appears first as a blue-white jewel against the void, but this impression is deceptive. The planet long ago exhausted its capacity to support natural life. The blue comes from atmospheric processes working ceaselessly to maintain breathable air. The white comes from arcologies that wrap entire continents in layered domes. What ancient peoples would have called Earth is buried beneath 40,000 years of construction, layer upon layer of habitation stacked so high that the lowest levels have not seen sunlight in millennia. But psychers do not perceive Terra primarily through physical sight. In the warp, Terra burns. The entire system blazes with psychic illumination so intense that navigators must shield their warp eyes or risk being blinded by the radiance. The source is singular and unmistakable, deep within the planet's crust, beneath the continental sprawl of the Imperial Palace. Something of unimaginable power maintains its eternal vigil. The Emperor's presence in the immaterium is not subtle. It is a sun of consciousness, a stellar furnace of will that drowns out every other psychic signature for light years in every direction. And feeding that sun, sustaining its endless burning, is a choir of 10,000 souls singing their last hymn. The black ships do not land on Terra's surface. Instead, they dock at orbital platforms, ancient massive structures that make even their own considerable bulk seem insignificant. Here, under the watchful eye of the Adeptus Custodes and the cold efficiency of administratum functionaries, the cargo is processed. The psychers are sorted. This is where futures are decided. Adepts of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica conduct examinations, physical, mental, spiritual. They measure psychic potential on scales ranging from iota, barely perceptible, to alpha plus, world-threatening. They assess stability, control, resistance to warp predation. They evaluate age, learning capacity, genetic markers, and 1,000 other factors known only to their esoteric science. The strongest, most stable psychers, those who can shield their minds and control their gifts, are marked for specialized training. Some will become sanctioned psychers, their wills broken and rebuilt by a process that involves psychic binding directly to the Emperor's will. They will serve in the Imperial Guard, the Navy, or the Inquisition. Others will be selected for the soul-binding ritual that creates astropaths, telepaths capable of projecting their thoughts across the void, their physical eyes burned away as the price of their psychic sight. A rare few, the most exceptional, might be selected for service with Space Marine chapters as librarians, or even, in the rarest cases, recruited by the Grey Knights, the Imperium's ultimate weapon against demonic incursion. But for the majority, the sorting process ends with a different mark upon their record, Adeptus Astronomica. Those bearing this designation are taken from the orbital platforms and loaded onto smaller shuttles. They descend through Terra's atmosphere toward a specific region, what was once called Asia, where the Himalayan mountains still rise despite 40 millennia of construction. Here, a fortress stands that predates even the Imperium itself, a place known by many names but most commonly called the Forbidden Fortress, the Hollow Mountain. From the exterior, it appears as a massive pyramidal structure, its sides carved with devotional texts in 1,000 languages. But this visible fortress is merely the smallest fraction of the facility. The true structure extends deep into Terra's crust, a labyrinth of chambers and corridors that penetrate kilometers beneath the surface. Some sections are older than human spaceflight. Some bear architectural styles that predate recorded history. And at its heart, in chambers sealed from all but the most authorized personnel, lies the mechanism that has sustained human civilization for 10,000 years, the chamber of the Astronomicon. But those newly arrived do not see this place immediately. First, they must be prepared. First, they must be transformed from frightened civilians into something the Imperium can use. The Adeptus Astronomica is smaller than other branches of the Adeptus Terra, but what it lacks in size, it compensates for in importance. Its members, both psychers and the hereditary servants who support them live lives dedicated to a single purpose, maintaining the light that allows humanity to navigate the warp. The new arrivals are designated as acolytes. They are given robes of blue fabric, their heads are shaven, and they begin their training in the doctrines of the Astronomica. This is not the brutal conditioning inflicted upon sanctioned psychers, nor is it the agonizing soul-binding that creates astropaths. Instead, it is something stranger, a philosophical indoctrination that aims to make them accept, even embrace, their ultimate fate. The teachers are instructors, former acolytes who, for various reasons, were deemed unsuitable for final service in the chamber. Perhaps their psychic potential was too low, perhaps their mental stability too questionable, perhaps they simply lacked the specific frequency of psychic resonance required for the choir. They teach with the zeal of the survivor, with the guilt of those who were spared while others were consumed. The curriculum is unlike any educational program in the Imperium. Acolytes learn the lore of the Astronomicon, the technical and mystical knowledge of how the beacon functions. They study the nature of the warp, not as heretical dabblers, but as those who will literally become part of the Immaterium's fabric. They practice meditation techniques designed to make their psychic essences more receptive, more harmonious with the collective choir they will eventually join. But more than this, they learn philosophy. They learn about sacrifice, about the nature of duty that extends beyond personal survival. They study the history of the Imperium, the countless billions who have died to sustain humanity's fragile existence across the stars. They contemplate the meaning of individual life, weighed against species survival. They are shown the alternative. What would happen if the Astronomicon failed, if the warp routes closed, if humanity's scattered worlds fell one by one into darkness? Some acolytes resist this teaching. They see it for what it is, preparation for death, a gentle psychological manipulation designed to make them willing participants in their own consumption. These individuals often do not last long. They are identified as problematic and quietly shuffled into other roles, or if truly resistant, simply disposed of. But many do not resist. This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire process. Given time, given the right philosophical framework, given community among those who face the same fate, humans can convince themselves that even death, even consumption, even complete annihilation of the self can be meaningful, sacred, and honor. The acolytes form bonds with one another. They study together, meditate together, share their fears and hopes in whispered conversations during the rare moments of personal time. They create a culture, a micro-society of the condemned who find meaning in their shared doom. And some, not all but some, achieve a state the Astronomica calls chosen. To become chosen is to genuinely internalize the teachings, to look at the mechanism that will consume your soul and see not horror, but purpose, to understand that your individual existence is temporary by nature, but the light you will help sustain could guide humanity for another 10,000 years, to accept, without reservation or resentment, that the price is worth paying. The chosen are marked by their transformation. Their blue robes are exchanged for yellow, and they receive the scarlet badge that designates their status. They are revered within the Astronomica, held in higher esteem than even the instructors or the master of the Astronomicon himself. They spend their remaining time in prayer and contemplation, preparing themselves for the moment when they will be called to serve. But whether chosen or simply resigned, whether believing or terrified, eventually all the acolytes receive the same summons. You are called to the chamber. And in that moment, however much philosophical preparation they have received, however sincerely they believe in the righteousness of their sacrifice, in that moment, they understand that everything they were, everything they might have been, is about to end. Part 3. The Chamber of the Astronomicon. The descent into the chamber is a journey through layers of reality. It begins in the upper levels of the hollow mountain, in corridors that, while ancient, still feel fundamentally human in their proportions. But as the acolytes are led deeper, escorted by servitors and overseen by members of the Adeptus Astronomica, the architecture begins to change. The passages become older. Stone gives way to materials that should not exist, metals that remain room temperature regardless of environment, ceramics that seem to absorb light rather than reflect it, crystalline structures that grow from the walls like frozen lightning. These are remnants of the dark age of technology, from humanity's lost golden age when science bordered on the incomprehensible. And deeper still, they pass into sections that predate humanity's mastery of terror, chambers carved when the planet was young, by hands unknown, for purposes that remain mysterious even to the most learned tech priests. The Emperor discovered these places during Terra's unification, recognized their potential, and built his greatest work within their ancient bones. The psychic pressure increases with every level descended. The warp is not evenly distributed across real space. Certain locations, certain geometric configurations, certain materials can thin the barrier between dimensions. The chamber of the Astronomicon was deliberately constructed in such a location, where the membrane between reality and the immaterium grows gossamer thin. For psychers, this creates an increasingly uncomfortable sensation. The part of their consciousness that touches the warp becomes hyperactive, oversensitive. They begin to perceive things that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The walls seem to breathe with slow, rhythmic pulses. The air itself takes on texture and weight. Colors shift into spectrums that should not be visible to human eyes, and they can hear it, the choir. At first, it is barely perceptible, a distant humming that might be mistaken for machinery or acoustic resonance in the ancient stone. But as they descend deeper, it grows louder, clearer, more distinct. It is not a sound that travels through air. It is a psychic resonance, a collective broadcasting of consciousness that penetrates directly into the mind. 10,000 voices singing in harmony. No, that description is inadequate. It is 10,000 minds merged into a single gestalt consciousness, their individual thoughts and identities dissolved into a unified purpose. They sing the beacon into existence, their psychic essences woven together into a structure of pure will and intention that burns through the warp like a lighthouse cutting through fog, and they are dying. This truth becomes undeniable as the acolytes approach the chamber proper. The choir is not static, it is dynamic, constantly shifting as individual voices fade, and new ones must be added to maintain the harmony. The psychic pressure of sustaining the Astronomicon consumes them, burning through their life force like fuel in a furnace. Some last months, others only weeks. A rare few, particularly powerful or particularly compatible with the collective resonance, might endure for years, but all of them die. The chamber itself defies simple description because it exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. To describe only what can be seen with physical eyes is to capture perhaps a tenth of the true structure. Physically, it is a vast spherical space, perhaps a kilometer in diameter. The walls curve away into shadows above and below, and throughout this volume, suspended by anti-gravity generators or psychically sustained platforms, are the thrones, thousands of them. Each throne is a masterwork of archaeotech, ancient machinery whose principles of operation have been lost to time, but whose function remains clear. They are life support systems and psychic amplifiers combined, designed to take the raw, untutored psychic potential of a human mind and channel it, focus it, make it compatible with the collective whole. Every throne is occupied. The acolytes see them as they enter, the chosen who came before, now serving their sacred purpose. They sit motionless in their restraints, their bodies sustained by nutrient feeds and waste management systems that handle the biological functions they can no longer attend to themselves. Their eyes are open but unseeing, rolled back to show only the whites. Their mouths hang slack, breath coming in slow, mechanical rhythms controlled by the throne rather than conscious will. They look dead, but they are not. They are something worse and better than dead. They are transcended, their consciousness pulled away from their bodies and into the psychic structure that sustains the Astronomicon. At the center of the chamber, positioned at the precise geometric focus of the spherical space, stands a platform accessible only by a single bridge, and upon this platform rests something that makes even the thrones pale in significance, the central nexus. This is the heart of the entire mechanism, the core around which the choir revolves. It is larger than the other thrones, more complex, its surfaces covered in geometries that hurt to observe directly. Cables as thick as a man's torso snake away from it, disappearing into the chamber's walls and floor. Crystalline structures grow from its surface, pulsing with light that shifts through colors that have no names, and connected to this central throne, feeding it, sustaining it, directing the entire collective consciousness of the choir. The Emperor's will, not his physical presence. His body remains entombed upon the golden throne, deep within the imperial palace's innermost sanctum, but his consciousness, vast beyond mortal comprehension, extends through the warp like roots through soil. One of these extensions touches the chamber of the Astronomicon, using the central nexus as an anchor point, and through this connection, he shapes the raw psychic power of 10,000 burning souls into the focused beam that guides humanity through the darkness. The acolytes can feel his presence. It is terrible and glorious in equal measure, a consciousness so much larger than their own that comparison becomes meaningless. It is like an insect trying to understand an ocean, like a candle trying to comprehend the sun. His attention does not focus on them individually. They are too small, too insignificant for that, but his will surrounds them, permeates them, and in its pressure they feel something that might be compassion mixed with absolute necessity. He knows what he is asking of them. He has known for 10,000 years, and he will continue asking because the alternative is extinction. Part 4. The joining. The process of joining the choir is clinical in its efficiency, yet somehow more terrible than any torture could be. The acolytes are not simply placed into the thrones. First, they must be prepared, modified to better interface with the ancient machinery. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus work in the preparation chambers adjacent to the main chamber, performing procedures that blur the line between medicine and desecration. Neural interface ports are installed, sockets drilled directly into the skull, wired into the brain's psychic centers. Nutrient feeds are surgically implanted into major blood vessels. Waste management systems are installed with the impersonal efficiency of factory workers assembling servitors. The body is mapped, scanned, its electrical and psychic patterns recorded for optimal integration with the throne's systems. The acolytes are conscious throughout these procedures. This is not cruelty for its own sake. It is necessity. The psychic centers of the brain must remain active during the installation process, or the interfaces will not calibrate correctly. They feel everything: the drill penetrating bone, the cold metal sliding into gray matter, the violation of having their bodies transformed into components of a larger machine. Some scream, some weep, some retreat into catatonia, their minds unable to process the horror of what is being done to them. But the procedures continue regardless. When the modifications are complete, the acolytes are brought to their assigned thrones. These have been selected specifically for them based on their psychic frequency, their power rating, their psychological profile. The choir must maintain harmony, and this requires careful matching of compatible individuals. The restraints close around wrists and ankles with pneumatic hisses. The neural interfaces click into place with sounds like locks engaging. The nutrient feeds begin their slow drip of chemicals designed to sustain biological function, while suppressing unnecessary brain activity. The waste management systems activate, handling the body's needs with mechanical efficiency. And then the throne begins its work. It starts gradually, a gentle pull on the psychic essence, like someone taking your hand and leading you toward a door. The acolyte's consciousness is drawn outward, expanding beyond the confines of their skull, reaching into the space where the warp and real space intersect. In this expanded state, they can perceive the choir properly for the first time. 10,000 minds, 10,000 souls, all merged into a single harmonious structure. It is beautiful in a way that transcends aesthetics, a mathematical perfection, a complexity that rivals the intricate dance of galaxy formation. Each voice contributes its own unique frequency, and together they create something that resonates across dimensional boundaries. The Astronomicon itself becomes visible to their inner sight, not as light exactly, but as a structure of pure thought given substance in the immaterium. It is a lighthouse, yes, but also a fortress wall, a barrier against the tides of chaos that constantly seek to breach the boundaries of reality. The Emperor's will shapes it, directs it, gives it purpose and coherence. And now the acolyte must add their own voice to the choir. The first moment of true integration is indescribable. The boundaries of the self begin to dissolve. Where does your consciousness end and the collective begin? The question becomes meaningless. Your memories are still yours, but they are also shared, accessible to the Gestalt. Your thoughts are your own, but they harmonize with thousands of other thoughts, creating resonances and overtones that no single mind could produce. It is not painful exactly. It is overwhelming. Imagine hearing a symphony where you are simultaneously every instrument. Imagine thinking in 10,000 voices at once. Imagine feeling the boundaries of your identity stretching, thinning, becoming translucent. Some acolytes embrace this transformation. For them, especially the chosen who prepared themselves philosophically, this dissolution of self is transcendence. They are becoming part of something greater, something eternal. Their individual suffering and fear and limitation are falling away, replaced by the purpose and power of the collective. Others fight it. They cling to their sense of self, desperately trying to maintain the boundaries of their individual consciousness, even as the choir pulls them deeper into its embrace. For them, the integration is agony, not physical pain, but the spiritual suffering of watching yourself disappear piece by piece into something vast and alien. But whether they embrace it or fight it, the outcome is the same. The choir requires their contribution. The Astronomicon must burn, and so their resistance is ultimately meaningless. The Emperor's will, channeled through the central nexus, guides the integration. It is not personal. He does not speak to each acolyte individually or comfort their fears. His consciousness operates on scales too vast for that. But his purpose is clear, unyielding, absolute. He shapes their psychic essence the way a potter shapes clay, molding it into a form that can contribute efficiently to the beacon. And in this shaping, something strange happens. The acolytes begin to understand, not intellectually. They already understood intellectually why the sacrifice was necessary, but understanding and experiencing are different things. Now, merged with the choir, perceiving reality from the Emperor's perspective, however dimly, they begin to truly comprehend the vastness of the burden he carries. They see the galaxy as he sees it. 1,000,000 worlds, each one a candle flame guttering in the darkness. Billions upon billions of human lives, spread across impossible distances, united only by the psychic beacon that allows them to maintain contact, trade, share knowledge and resources. Without the Astronomicon, these flames would go out one by one. Isolated worlds would fall to Xenos predation, to internal collapse, to chaos corruption. Within a few centuries, perhaps a millennium at most, humanity would be extinct. Not all at once, but world by world, forgotten and alone. They see the enemies that surround humanity, the forces of chaos, eternally plotting to drag real space into the warp's nightmare dimensions. The Tyranid hive fleets, consuming everything in their path with mindless hunger. The orcs, breeding and spreading like a green tide whenever opposition weakens. The Necrons, ancient and terrible, awakening from their millennia-long sleep with contempt for all organic life. The Ieldari, pursuing their own mysterious agenda with powers humanity cannot match, and countless other threats, each one capable of destroying human civilization if given the chance. Against these odds, survival seems impossible, and yet humanity endures. Why? Because the Emperor refuses to surrender, because he has sat upon the golden throne for 10,000 years, sustaining the Astronomicon despite the unbearable cost, because he makes the impossible choice every single day. Whose lives will burn to keep the light shining? How many must die today so that billions might live tomorrow? And in understanding this, many of the acolytes experience something unexpected. Gratitude, not for their own fate. No amount of philosophical preparation makes consumption pleasant, but gratitude that someone is willing to make these choices, that someone is capable of bearing the weight of necessity without flinching, without excusing, without turning away from the horror of what must be done. The Emperor is not kind. He cannot afford kindness, but he is committed, absolutely and without reservation, to humanity's survival. And in a galaxy where survival means accepting monstrous compromises, this commitment becomes the closest thing to love that can exist at the cosmic scale. This realization does not make the sacrifice easier, but it gives it context, meaning, purpose beyond mere mechanical necessity. And for many acolytes, in their final moments of individual consciousness, before they are fully absorbed into the choir, this meaning is enough. Part 5. The Burning. Once fully integrated into the choir, the acolytes cease to exist as individuals in any meaningful sense. Their bodies remain in the thrones, sustained by the machinery, but the consciousness that once inhabited those bodies has been distributed across the collective gestalt. This is when the true work begins. The choir does not simply produce psychic energy, it shapes that energy into the specific structure required for the Astronomicon. This requires focus, coordination, and above all, harmony. Imagine 10,000 musicians playing a single continuous note that must never waver. Imagine 10,000 minds thinking the same thought, feeling the same emotion, pursuing the same purpose with absolute synchronization. This is the state the choir must maintain constantly. The Astronomicon broadcasts on multiple psychic frequencies simultaneously. Navigators, who possess specialized organs that allow them to perceive the warp, can sense its light and use it to triangulate their position in the Imperium. Its range extends roughly 50,000 light-years in all directions from Terra, covering the majority of the galaxy's most densely populated regions, defining the effective borders of the Imperium itself. But maintaining this broadcast requires constant psychic effort. The warp is not static. It churns with currents and storms, eddies and undertows. The forces of chaos constantly seek to disrupt the Astronomicon, to blind it or corrupt it or simply tear it apart. Without the Emperor's will directing the choir, without the combined strength of 10,000 souls holding the structure stable, the beacon would collapse within moments, and this effort consumes them. Not all at once, not immediately, but inexorably, like a candle burning down to nothing. Their psychic essence is the fuel that feeds the Astronomican's flames, and with each moment of broadcast, more of that essence is burned away. The process is not uniform. Some members of the choir possess more psychic potential than others. They contribute more but also exhaust themselves more quickly. Some are more compatible with the collective resonance, allowing them to integrate more efficiently and thus last longer. Age matters, health matters, even emotional state at the moment of joining can affect how long an individual's essence sustains the burning. On average, a member of the choir lasts between 3 and 6 months. During this time, their body in the throne slowly deteriorates. The machinery sustains biological function, but it cannot prevent the gradual shutdown of systems under psychic strain. Muscle mass wastes away, bones become brittle, internal organs begin to fail. The body becomes a husk, kept technically alive only by the throne's intervention. But the consciousness, the part that matters for the Astronomican, continues to burn. From the perspective of the choir, time becomes meaningless. There is no day or night in the psychic realm where they exist. There is no sense of duration or sequence. There is only the eternal now of the broadcast, the constant effort of maintaining the light. And yet they are aware, not as individuals, that sense of separate selfhood is gone, but the Gestalt possesses a form of consciousness, a collective awareness that is simultaneously everyone and no one. This Gestalt perceives reality on scales that individual humans cannot comprehend. It feels the ships that use the Astronomican for navigation, distant presences that briefly resonate with the beacon as they emerge from or enter the warp. It senses the sectors of space where warp storms make the beacon's light difficult to perceive. It knows with absolute certainty the moment when another member of the choir burns out and must be replaced. This last awareness is perhaps the strangest aspect of existence as part of the Gestalt. When someone dies, when their psychic essence is finally exhausted, the choir knows. It feels the gap their absence creates, the slight weakening of the overall structure. Immediately, the other members compensate, redistributing the load, strengthening their own contributions to maintain the beacon's stability. And then, within hours at most, a new voice joins the song. Another acolyte, prepared and modified, taking their place in a throne and adding their essence to the collective. The gap fills, the harmony restores, the beacon burns as bright as ever. This cycle has repeated every day for 10,000 years. 10,000 years of 365 days, over 3.5 million days. With approximately 1,000 psychers dying each day, the Astronomican has consumed more than 3 billion souls. This number defies comprehension. It is easier to think of it abstractly, as statistics, as necessary cost. To truly contemplate 3 billion individual lives, each one as real and complex as your own, each one with their own hopes and fears and potential, is to confront a horror that the human mind instinctively recoils from. And yet this is the price of survival. 3 billion deaths to keep the light burning. 3 billion sacrifices to prevent the extinction of a species. 3 billion souls consumed so that countless billions more could live, travel, trade, communicate, endure in a galaxy that wants nothing more than to watch them die. Is this mathematics, moral? The question has no satisfactory answer. Morality operates on human scales, and this situation transcends those scales. It is cosmic necessity, dressed in the trappings of ritual and law. The Imperium could not exist without the Astronomican. Humanity would fragment and fall without the beacon to guide them, and the beacon requires fuel, so the souls burn. Part 6. What the choir sees. Within the Gestalt consciousness of the choir, perception takes forms that cannot be adequately translated into human language or experience. But attempts have been made by astropaths who have touched the fringes of the choir's awareness, by navigators who have seen its light from within the warp, by the rare individuals who have somehow survived contact with the Emperor's fragmentary consciousness. These accounts, fragmentary and often contradictory, paint a picture of something beyond either heaven or hell. The choir exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Physically, their bodies remain in the thrones within the chamber, sustained by machinery, but their consciousness extends through the warp, spread across light years of psychic space, woven into the structure of the Astronomican itself. In this expanded state, they perceive the galaxy not as physical matter, but as flows of consciousness and emotion. Each human soul appears as a small light in the darkness. Worlds populated by billions glow with collective brightness. The warp routes between stars are visible as currents in the immaterium, safer passages where the boundary between dimensions remains relatively stable, and everywhere, pressing against the edges of perception, are the threats. The forces of chaos are not abstract concepts when viewed from the choir's perspective. They are tangible presences, massive and malevolent, constantly probing the boundaries between the warp and real space for weaknesses. The four gods, Horn, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, appear as impossibly vast consciousnesses, each one composed of the collective psychic resonance of specific emotions and desires given terrible form. Horn is rage and bloodlust crystallized into a sentient typhoon of violence. Tzeentch is change and ambition twisted into plots, within plots, within plots, a maze of machinations that even he cannot fully comprehend. Nurgle is entropy and disease given consciousness, finding beauty in decay, offering the peace of ultimate surrender to mortality. Slaanesh is sensation pursued beyond all reason, pleasure and pain merged into a single howling appetite that can never be satisfied. These entities notice the Astronomicon. How could they not? It is a bonfire of human souls burning in their domain, a defiant statement that humanity refuses to be consumed. They attack it constantly, sending waves of demonic entities to assault the structure, attempting to corrupt individual members of the choir, seeking any weakness that might allow them to tear the beacon apart. But they cannot succeed, because the Emperor's will stands between them and their prize. His presence in the warp is unlike anything else that exists in the Imperium. He is not a chaos god. He was born human and retains enough of that humanity to be fundamentally different from the ruinous powers. But he is something more than human now, after 10,000 years of existence, as a being of pure will sustained by the constant sacrifice of souls. From the choir's perspective, he appears as a golden sun, not metaphorically, but as the closest approximation their perception can produce for something that exists beyond normal categories. He surrounds them, encompasses them, his consciousness the container within which they burn. He shapes their light, focuses their power, uses their sacrifice to project the beacon across the galaxy. And he fights, constantly, without rest, every moment of every day for 10,000 years. He has battled the forces of chaos in the psychic realm, preventing them from breaching Terra's defenses, from corrupting the Astronomicon, from pouring through into real space where they could consume humanity wholesale. The choir participates in this battle, though not consciously. Their existence as a burning beacon is itself an act of warfare, a denial of the Chaos God's claim to the warp, a statement that this dimension can sustain things other than corruption and madness. Every soul that joins the choir and maintains their contribution to the harmony is a victory. Every moment the beacon burns bright is a defeat for those who would see it extinguished. But the cost... The choir cannot forget the cost, because they are the cost. They are dying, have been dying since the moment they joined, will continue dying until their essence is completely consumed. And in their expanded awareness, they know that more are coming, always more. An endless stream of acolytes being prepared, modified, integrated, burned. 3 billion souls so far, but how many more before the need ends? The question haunts the Gestalt, not with fear. Fear requires a sense of self-preservation that they no longer possess, but with a kind of cosmic sadness, a recognition that this sacrifice, while necessary, is also terrible, that the Imperium has become a machine that consumes its own children to sustain itself, that the Emperor, despite his power and wisdom and absolute commitment to humanity's survival, has been forced into a position where he must demand this price, and the most terrible truth, that there is no end in sight. The threats facing humanity are not diminishing. The warp grows more turbulent with each passing century, as human emotions across the galaxy feed the Chaos God's power. The Tyranid hive fleets continue their approach from outside the galaxy. The Necrons wake from their tomb worlds in increasing numbers. Internal corruption and heresy spread through the Imperium like disease through a weakened body. The Astronomicon must burn brighter, not dimmer, which means more fuel, more souls, more acolytes brought to the chamber and fed into the machinery of necessity. The cycle continues, must continue, will continue until either the threats are overcome or humanity itself is extinct. And in the psychic realm, where the choir exists, suspended between life and death, between self and collective, between hope and despair, they sing their eternal song and accept that this is the price of survival. Because if they do not burn, everything they ever knew, everyone they ever loved, every hope humanity has ever held will be consumed by darkness. So they burn willingly, not happily, not without grief for what has been lost, but willingly, because someone must, because the Emperor cannot carry this burden alone, because 3 billion souls burning across 10,000 years is a terrible price. But extinction would be worse, and so the light continues to shine. Part 7. The Golden Throne. To understand the full scope of the Astronomican's sacrifice, one must also understand its connection to the Golden Throne, the other great mechanism of humanity's survival and the source of even darker necessities. Deep within the imperial palace, far beneath even the chamber of the Astronomican, lies the Sanctum Imperialis. This is the emperor's physical prison and throne, the place where his broken body has sat for 10,000 years, kept alive by technology that even the Adeptus Mechanicus no longer fully comprehends. The Golden Throne is not simply a life support system, though it performs that function. It is an artifact from the dark age of technology, ancient beyond reckoning, built using principles that humanity's current degraded science cannot replicate. The Emperor discovered it in the ruins beneath the Himalaysian mountains during Terra's unification and modified it for his purposes. Originally, it was designed as a gateway into the Aeldari Webway, a network of tunnels through real space that allows faster-than-light travel without exposure to the warp's dangers. The Emperor's greatest work, his secret project during the Great Crusade, was to create a human section of the webway that would free humanity from its dependence on warp travel and the navigator houses. But that project failed catastrophically when Magnus the Red, attempting to warn his father of Horus's treachery, broke through the psychic wards surrounding the human webway section. Demons poured through the breach, and only the Emperor's constant psychic effort keeps them contained behind the sealed portal. He has sat upon the Golden Throne for 10,000 years, using its amplification of his powers to hold that door closed. If he were to die, that door would open. Terra would be consumed by demonic invasion within hours. The Sol system would likely fall within days, and without the Emperor's guidance, the Astronomican would fail, leaving humanity scattered and blind across the galaxy. This is why the Golden Throne must never fail. But like the Astronomican, the Golden Throne requires fuel, not to power the mechanism itself, that draws on energies the Mechanicus can barely measure, but to sustain the Emperor. His body was mortally wounded during his battle with Horus Lupercal at the end of the Horus Heresy. The damage was so severe that even his perpetual nature could not heal it. He endures only through sheer force of will, powered by psychic energy drawn from external sources. Those sources are psychers, separate from the 1,000 souls daily consumed by the Astronomican. An additional number, the exact count varies by account, but most sources suggest several hundred to another 1,000, are sacrificed directly to the Golden Throne. These psychers are not trained, they are not prepared, they are not given philosophical justifications or taught to accept their fate with equanimity. They are simply consumed. The process is brutal in its efficiency. The psychers are brought before the throne in groups, their terror palpable, their minds often broken by the psychic pressure of being in the Emperor's direct presence. They are placed into chambers adjacent to the throne, and then their souls are ripped away, not slowly like the Astronomican's burning, not gradually integrated into a greater whole, simply torn from their bodies and consumed as raw psychic energy to sustain the Emperor's existence. Their bodies die instantly, collapsing as empty husks. Their consciousness is obliterated, not transcended or transformed, simply ended. This is the part of the sacrifice that even the Imperium's propaganda rarely acknowledges. The Astronomican, with its chosen and its philosophy and its months-long burning, can be portrayed as meaningful service. But the Golden Throne's consumption is naked necessity, stripped of pretense. The Emperor needs souls to survive, so souls are provided. By late M36, as the Eye of Terror and other warp rifts visibly expanded, the tech priests servicing the Golden Throne demanded increases in the number of psychers sacrificed. The beacon required more power. The sealed webway door grew harder to hold closed. The Emperor's essence, spread so thin across so many vital functions, needed more fuel. By M41, the number of psychers sacrificed daily had quadrupled from what it was when the Emperor first ascended to the throne. 4 times as many souls consumed every single day, and the rate continues to accelerate. Worse still, the Golden Throne itself is failing. In the last years of M41, Mechanicus adepts made a horrifying discovery. Critical systems within the throne were breaking down, and they lacked the knowledge to repair them. The technology is too ancient, too advanced, too far beyond current understanding. They can maintain existing functions through ritual and prayer, but when something breaks at a fundamental level, they are helpless. The degradation is accelerating. Systems that should have lasted millennia are failing after mere centuries of use. Safety margins are shrinking. The amount of psychic energy required to maintain the same level of function increases yearly. The implications are existential. Eventually, perhaps within centuries, Perhaps sooner, the Golden Throne will fail completely. When it does, the Emperor's body will die, the sealed webway portal will open, terror will fall to demonic invasion, and the Astronomicon will go dark. The end of the Imperium, the extinction of humanity as a unified civilization, the triumph of chaos, and all the other enemies that have waited 10,000 years for exactly this moment, unless something changes. And so the desperate searches begin. Expeditions are launched to find ancient standard template construct databases that might contain the knowledge needed to repair the throne. Deals are struck with the dark Eldari of Komorach, who understand the throne's technology better than any human, but whose price for assistance is measured in suffering. The Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guardians, mount secret missions to recover ancient tech artifacts that might help. But as of M42, no solution has been found. The Golden Throne continues to fail. The psychic cost continues to increase, and more souls must burn. The Astronomicon's choir, existing in their expanded awareness, perceives this degradation. They can feel the Emperor's strain, the increasing difficulty he faces in maintaining all his functions simultaneously. They understand with terrible clarity that their sacrifice, already immense, will need to become even greater. More psychers will be needed. The black ships must range farther, collect more aggressively, process faster. The tithe must increase. Worlds that once surrendered dozens of psychers per century may need to provide hundreds. The holding facilities will overflow. The selection criteria will necessarily become less stringent, and still, it may not be enough. Because the final, darkest truth is this: the Emperor is fading. 10,000 years of existence as a will without a properly functioning body has taken its toll. His consciousness is fragmenting, pieces of it splintering off to handle specific functions independently. The Gestalt entity that maintains the Astronomicon is no longer directly connected to the primary consciousness on the Golden Throne, but operates semi-autonomously, guided by protocols established millennia ago. What remains on the Golden Throne, the core essence that battles chaos and holds the webway door closed, is not quite the man who founded the Imperium. It is something that has become more and less than human, transformed by necessity into a being whose thoughts operate on timescales and complexities beyond mortal comprehension. And that being is, slowly but inexorably, dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, but like a star that has exhausted its hydrogen and begun to burn heavier elements, producing less energy with more fuel consumption, moving inevitably toward the collapse that will end its existence. The Imperium races against this countdown, desperately seeking solutions while maintaining the terrible machinery of sacrifice that sustains the present. Every day that passes is a day closer to potential catastrophe. Every psyche consumed is both necessary fuel and a reminder of the price being paid. And in the chamber of the Astronomicon, the choir continues to sing, knowing that their sacrifice, while necessary today, may prove insufficient tomorrow. Part 8. The Alternative. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire Astronomicon sacrifice is not that it happens, but that it must happen. To understand why requires examining the alternatives and recognizing that each one is worse than the status quo, however terrible that status quo may be. What would happen if the Imperium simply stopped the sacrifice? If it declared, on moral grounds, that consuming souls to power the Astronomicon and Golden Throne was unacceptable and sought other solutions? The answer plays out in simulations conducted by Imperial strategos, in predictive models run by tech priests, in divinations performed by the most powerful sanctioned psychers. The result is always the same: extinction. Without the Astronomicon, warp travel becomes vastly more dangerous and difficult. Navigators can no longer use the beacon to triangulate their position in the immaterium. They must rely on shorter jumps, dead reckoning, and local psychic landmarks, all of which are unreliable in the constantly shifting currents of the warp. Journey times increase by factors of 10 or more. A voyage that once took weeks might take years. The risk of being lost in the warp, trapped forever in a dimension where time flows non-linearly, skyrockets. More ships are consumed by warp predators or torn apart by immaterial storms. Within a decade, interstellar commerce and communication would collapse. The vast trade networks that allow densely populated hive worlds to receive food from agri-worlds would break down. Forge worlds would run out of raw materials from mining worlds. Military reinforcements would arrive years too late to help against Xenos invasions. Within a generation, the Imperium would fragment into isolated sectors, each one cut off from Terra's central authority and unable to receive support from their neighbors, and then the predators would come. Orc wargs, no longer opposed by coordinated imperial military response, would sweep across entire sectors. Tyrannid hive fleets would devour world after world with no unified defense possible. Chaos cults, no longer suppressed by inquisitorial investigations backed by rapid military response, would spread like wildfire. The Aeldari would reclaim former maiden worlds from human occupation. The Necrons would awaken and purge the organic infestations from their tomb worlds without opposition. The Tau Empire would expand into suddenly defenseless imperial territory. World by world, the isolated fragments of humanity would fall. Some might endure for centuries as fortress systems, but isolated survival is just delayed extinction. Eventually, every last human world would be consumed by one threat or another. Total time from the Astronomican's failure to humanity's complete extinction. Estimates range from 500 to 1500 years, depending on how quickly the various threats capitalize on humanity's weakness. So the Astronomican must burn. There is no alternative that preserves humanity as a unified civilization. But what about the Golden Throne specifically? Could the Emperor's body be allowed to die while preserving the Astronomican through some other means? This alternative has been contemplated by the highest authorities in the Imperium, the High Lords of Terra, the Fabricator General of Mars, even the Adeptus Custodes, who guard the Emperor's body. The answer is complex and deeply troubling. If the Emperor dies, several simultaneous catastrophes would likely occur. First, the sealed webway portal beneath the Imperial Palace would open, releasing the demonic hordes that have pressed against it for 10,000 years. Terra would be invaded by an army of warp entities that have had 10 millennia to plan their assault. The casualties would be measured in billions. The Sol system itself might be transformed into a new Eye of Terror, a permanent warp rift from which demons could pour into real space indefinitely. Second, the Astronomican would lose the focusing influence of the Emperor's will. The choir might continue burning, but without his guidance, they would be a formless psychic scream rather than a focused beacon. Navigators would still perceive them, but wouldn't be able to use that perception for navigation. The practical result would be the same as the Astronomican failing completely. Third, the Emperor's presence in the warp acts as a barrier against the Chaos God's direct intervention in real space. He has fought them on the psychic battlefield for 10,000 years, keeping them occupied, limiting their ability to pour their full attention and power into corrupting humanity. If he dies, that barrier dissolves. The full, undiluted focus of the four ruinous powers would fall upon humanity. Fourth, and perhaps most mysteriously, there is the question of what would happen to the Emperor's soul upon his death. Some theorize he would reincarnate, as he has done in the past when his previous incarnations died. But this is uncertain. His current state is unprecedented, and 10,000 years of existence as a fragmenting consciousness might prevent normal perpetual resurrection. Others worry he might become something worse. There is a theory, whispered in the darkest corners of the Inquisition, that the Emperor's soul, fed by 10,000 years of worship from trillions of believers, has become a nascent chaos god. If he were to die and fully transition into the warp, he might emerge as the god of mankind, powerful enough to rival the four ruinous powers. This sounds positive until you consider what it would mean. The chaos gods are not conscious entities that can be reasoned with. They are incarnations of specific emotional and conceptual patterns given terrible sentience. A god of mankind would embody all of humanity's traits: courage and cowardice, mercy and cruelty, hope and despair, order and tyranny. It might protect humanity, but at what cost to humanity's soul? And there is an even darker possibility, that the Emperor's death would not create a new god of order, but would be claimed by chaos, that his soul, twisted by 10 millennia of necessary atrocities, would be torn apart and consumed by the very entities he has fought against, that the ultimate irony would be the god emperor of mankind becoming fuel for the chaos gods he has opposed for so long. Given these alternatives, allowing the emperor's body to die is not seriously considered by those with the power to make such decisions. The risk is too great, the consequences too catastrophic, so the Golden Throne must be maintained, the emperor must be sustained, and the souls must continue to burn. The moral calculus is brutal. Sacrifice millions to save trillions. Consume the psychically gifted so that the unguided majority can survive. Build an empire on the bones of those born different, those touched by the warp, those whose only crime was being born with abilities they never asked for. And the most terrible aspect, this calculus is correct. In a universe less hostile, in a galaxy less saturated with existential threats, Perhaps humanity could afford to value individual rights over collective survival. Perhaps the moral weight of 3 billion sacrificed souls would tip the scales toward choosing a different path, even if that path led to a slower, gentler extinction. But the galaxy is hostile. The threats are real and immediate and overwhelming. Chaos is not a metaphor for internal corruption. It is a literal dimensional infection that transforms human souls into fuel for predatory god entities. The Tyranids are not a distant problem. Their hive fleets have already consumed thousands of worlds and show no sign of stopping. The Necrons are not remnants of a dead civilization. They are waking up and reclaiming the galaxy they once ruled. Against these odds, sentiment is suicide. Mercy is weakness. Individual rights are luxuries that humanity cannot afford. So the Imperium makes the choice that any entity prioritizing survival must make. It sacrifices the few for the many. It establishes the mechanisms, the black ships, the Scholastica Psychona, the Adeptus Astronomica, the Golden Throne's feeding chambers, and it maintains them with the ruthless efficiency of necessity. And it tells itself, because it must, that this is for the greater good, that the Emperor, in his wisdom, knows this is the only way, that the sacrificed understand and accept their role, that meaning can be found even in death, especially in death that serves such vital purpose. Some of this is propaganda, some is self-deception, some is philosophical framework designed to make the unbearable seem bearable. But some of it is simply true. The souls that burn in the Astronomicon do serve a vital purpose. They do save billions of lives. Their sacrifice, while terrible, is not meaningless. And that, perhaps, is the most disturbing realization of all, that you can do something monstrous, something that violates every principle of individual dignity and rights, something that consumes 3 billion souls over 10,000 years, and still be right to do it because the alternative is worse. This is the moral universe the Imperium inhabits. This is the price of survival in a galaxy that offers no mercy, no respite, no gentle solutions. The light must burn. The souls must feed it. And those of us who live in that light, who travel by its guidance, who exist because it continues to shine. We must live with the knowledge that our survival is built on the ashes of millions who never had a choice. Conclusion: the eternal flame. In the year of our Emperor 42,000 and beyond, the Astronomicon continues to burn. 10,000 psychers sing their harmonious death song in the chamber beneath the hollow mountain. Another 1,000 are brought before the Golden Throne daily, their souls consumed in seconds. The black ships range across the galaxy, collecting the tithe from 1,000,000 worlds. The training programs continue in the Forbidden Fortress, preparing new acolytes for service they will not survive. The machinery of sacrifice functions with the smooth efficiency of 10,000 years of practice. Every role is defined, every procedure is refined, every rationalization is perfected. The Imperium has become expert in the management of souls, in the logistics of consumption, in the philosophy of necessary evil, and the light burns on. Navigators see it as a fixed point in the warp, stable and constant despite the immaterial currents that swirl around it. They use it to plot their courses, to guide their ships through the nightmare dimension, to emerge at their destinations with precious cargo and passengers intact. They do not think often about its cost. They cannot afford to. Their job is to navigate, not to philosophize about the price of navigation. Space Marines hear it as a chorus in their enhanced minds, a reminder that the Emperor's will extends across the galaxy. They use it as a focal point for meditation, a source of strength in battle, a connection to the divine. They honor it without question. That is the Space Marine way, service unto death, and beyond death, if the Emperor wills it. Imperial citizens, those without psychic gifts, perceive it only indirectly. They see its effects in the ships that bring trade goods from distant worlds. They feel its presence in the way their priests speak of the Emperor's guiding light. They benefit from it every day, without knowing or understanding the mechanism that makes their civilization possible. And in the deepest chambers beneath terror, the Emperor endures. His body remains entombed upon the Golden Throne, a corpse kept animated by will and machinery and the constant sacrifice of souls. His consciousness spans the galaxy, fighting battles in the warp that would drive mortal minds mad, holding together an Imperium that strains constantly toward fragmentation, maintaining the beacon that has guided humanity for 10 millennia. He feels every soul that burns. Not individually, he cannot afford that kind of personal attention, cannot let himself be paralyzed by the emotional weight of each death. But collectively, he knows. He feels the pressure of 3 billion deaths across 10,000 years. He carries that weight because someone must, because the alternative is worse, because he has made himself responsible for humanity's survival, and that burden includes terrible necessities. Is he still human? The question has no clear answer. He was born human 40,000 years ago in the ancient world, but 10,000 years of existence in this state, fragmenting consciousness, sustained by the death of millions, transformed by the worship of trillions, has changed him into something that transcends simple categorization. He is the God Emperor, whether he wanted that title or not. He is humanity's protector and its greatest monster. He is the one who makes the impossible choices and bears the unbearable weight. He is necessary, and his necessity makes him both savior and tyrant. And he endures because the work is not finished, cannot be finished, will perhaps never be finished. The threats facing humanity are not diminishing. If anything, they grow worse with each passing century. The great rift that tore across the galaxy has made warp travel more dangerous, has increased the power of chaos, has cut the Imperium in half. The Tyranid hive fleets continue their advance from the galactic fringe. The Necrons wake in ever-increasing numbers. Internal corruption spreads through an Imperium that has become too vast, too bureaucratic, too inflexible to root out the rot within. The Astronomicon must burn brighter. The sacrifice must increase. There is no end in sight. And perhaps that is the final, darkest truth of all, that this is not a temporary measure, not a crisis to be weathered until better solutions can be found. This is simply how things are, how they have been for 10,000 years, how they will be for 10,000 more, or until the end comes through the failure of the Golden Throne, or the extinction of the human species, or some unimaginable transformation that changes the fundamental equations of survival. The souls will continue to burn, the light will continue to shine, and humanity will continue to pay the terrible price of its own existence. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no victory, only survival. And survival in a galaxy that offers nothing but hostility requires sacrifice on scales that dwarf individual human comprehension. 3 billion souls across 10,000 years. How many more before the end? The question haunts the conscience of anyone who truly contemplates the Imperium's foundations. But it has no answer, cannot have an answer, because to admit there is an end, to acknowledge that this sacrifice might someday prove insufficient or unnecessary, would be to suggest that all those deaths might have been for nothing. So instead, the Imperium maintains its course. The machinery continues to function. The black ships continue to collect their cargo. The acolytes continue their training. The chosen continue to accept their fate. The choir continues to burn. And the Astronomicon shines on, a beacon in the darkness, a light purchased with the currency of souls. In the depths of the chamber, if you could somehow perceive the Gestalt consciousness of the choir itself, you might hear something that sounds like singing. 10,000 voices merged into harmony, producing a psychic broadcast that crosses the galaxy. But listen closer, and you might hear something else beneath the harmony. Sorrow, not for themselves. They have transcended the kind of self-regard that produces that emotion, but sorrow for what their existence represents, for the price humanity has decided to pay, for the millions yet unborn who will join them in the flames, for an emperor who carries a burden that would break any lesser being, for an Imperium that has become a machine that consumes its own children. And yet, woven through that sorrow, something else: determination, purpose, the absolute refusal to surrender. Because if they stop singing, if they let the light go dark, then all of it, all the sacrifice, all the suffering, all the terrible necessity becomes meaningless. So they sing, not because they want to, not because it's easy, not because they don't understand the horror of what has been done to them. They sing because someone must, because the galaxy is dark and hostile, and full of things that want to devour humanity, because 3 billion souls burning across 10,000 years is an unforgivable price. But extinction would be worse, and so the Emperor protects, through the sacrifice of those who never chose this fate, through the machinery of necessity, through the light that burns in the darkness, purchased with the currency of souls. The Astronomicon endures, the Imperium endures, humanity endures, and the price is paid every day by those who were born different, those who were chosen, those who burn so that others might live. This is the truth of the Imperium. This is the foundation upon which humanity's survival rests. This is what it means to be sacrificed to the Emperor. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, this terrible price is simply the cost of not yet being extinct. The light burns on, for the Emperor, for humanity, unto death and beyond. In the name of those who burn, we live.